You're listening to the Love Over Addiction podcast. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk with me and share your story. I am incredibly grateful.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, so we're going to go and talk a little bit about your partner and what kind of substance do they struggle with?
Okay. We met in junior high. We dated for about a year and a half in early high school. We had broken up for a few years, but we always kept in contact, and we always had a connection. And then when he graduated college, we got back together permanently and got married. And basically, he's a high achiever, very smart, loving, a very good provider for a family. He has a really good position at his job. He's had his job for a long time. He's just a very good man. He does have a strong family history of alcoholism. His substance is beer. He drinks beer, and it's quite a problem. And as far back as I can remember, he has struggled with anxiety and moodiness. And basically that's him in a nutshell. We've been together for over 26 years, and it's been a long road. It's been a long road.
So he is what you would define as a high functioning alcoholic.
Yes.
Would that be correct? And
yes.
Only beer, which is very interesting. So no hard liquor, no other substances?
No.
Okay. That's interesting. And so how many drinks would you say he drinks on average per week? Or is he more of a binge drinker that he has excessive amounts of beer at random times?
He drinks all the time. If he's not at work or sleeping, he's drinking beer. I don't even know how much he would drink in a week. Maybe 4 or 5 cases of beer in a week.
Wow. Okay.
It's a lot. It's constant.
It's a lot. And I'm so proud of you for not knowing. Like, I didn't mean to set you up for a trick question, but I absolutely love that you have managed to be so detached that's a true sign of your healing, that you're not counting the bottle. So that's wonderful. Congratulations.
I did for years. I counted. I did everything. I made sure, he wasn't drinking too much, or I would get upset if I knew that he was drinking more than what I thought in my mind was acceptable. But yeah, with my part of my recovery, I even have to fight myself to this day not to go out and count where he's at, and keep track. That's very tough.
But you're managing, which is terrific. That's really a great sign of growth. Well done. Does that amount of drinking affect, what does he do on vacations, or how does it affect your social life?
Well, first of all, he hasn't gone on a vacation with us in many years. It's hard for him to pull away from the home environment, which is his comfort zone and where he knows he can get it. And it's definitely at his, he always has it. It's always there. Social life, there's always that worry, like if we want to go out to dinner or do something, I always have to worry. Did he drink too much today, especially on the weekends? How much did he drink today? And, you know, a lot of times I'll just drive and I'll be like, well, you're not driving. And his tolerance is so high that a lot of times he can drink a massive amount of beer and actually act like a normal person that you wouldn't even know. So it's tough. It's tough. And it's always been a point of contention for me when we would want to go out for dinner or something like that. It's always a worry, always on my mind.
Yeah, that sounds really like limiting your social life in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Did his very high functioning, his ability to drink a lot and still act normal, was that then used as part of a defense to justify the drinking or to say to you, well, I don't really have a problem because I can function so well, I can hold down this job, I can behave normally?
Maybe in the early days, he, for quite a few years, admits he has a problem and a horrible problem. We are to the point where he did go to counseling for a while. He admits he has a horrible drinking problem. He knows it. He just hasn't gotten to the point yet to go to rehab. And that would definitely be, you know, from the education that the Stay or Go program and your podcast have given me, that education has pretty much told me that at this rate of his drinking, he would have to detox and go to rehab. And I basically told him that, because of course I'm doing more research than he is. He just has not gotten to that point yet. He's afraid of losing his job or losing his position at his job. So I think that kind of holds him back from going.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that?
About him not wanting to go?
Yeah.
I'm very frustrated. Heartbroken, frustrated. I'm getting very restless after all these years. I'm feeling like, okay, enough is enough. We've dealt with this for so long that I'm just done. And with all the work that I've done, you know, I've gone to a therapist for years. I've done your program, listened to your podcast, and that all has gotten me to the point where I'm very much detaching, much stronger of a human being than I was even a couple years ago. I'm just very frustrated. That is a thing for me. And we're at a point right now where he says, at the beginning of the year when he gets more vacation, he's going to take vacation and go to rehab. And he did call a place, to get information. And we're kind of just sitting on that right now. And I'm just keeping my mouth shut and just waiting to see what he does.
That's great.
I have plans to possibly leave this summer. I have a
Okay,
place
let's
to go.
talk about that. Let's talk about that. What are your plans, and like, do you have like boundaries in place so that if he does not attend rehab or if the rehab is not successful, what are you going to do? And like, how did you get to a point where you would decide to leave?
Your program was the game changer for me. I did the Stay or Go, and my therapist got me started for sure. She helped me to start focusing on me, because when I went into her, all I did was talk about him and fixing him. And she's like, what about you? And I said, oh, what about me? And she's like, well, where do you fit in to your life? And I'm like, I don't even know anymore, because all I do is worry about him. And she kept refocusing me on myself. What are your dreams? What do you love to do? You know, and all of these things. And then once I kind of got to a certain point where I really started thinking about leaving, I took the Stay or Go program, and that made me really face the reality, I think, because it would cross my mind, but I would never fully dive into, well, what does that look like? And your program kind of took me step by step through that and made me focus on, okay, well, what do I want out of life? You know, our kids are grown. Our kids are grown. We raised our kids. And, you know, now one's moved on, has children. The other one is in his last year of college. And we're going to be empty nesters in 6 months, 8 months. And it made me start, and I turned 50 a year ago. And I'm like, okay, am I going to just do this and tread water for the rest of my life, or am I going to finally make a choice to leave? And, you know, with your program, it made me dream about what does that look like? You know, what can I actually do with my life beyond the last 26 years? Because I had this dream that I think I never let go of what my life should look like and who I should be growing old with. And, you know, it's not that anymore. And I think it's so sad and so heartbreaking that I just didn't want to face it. And then when I looked at your program and went through the steps, I felt like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. I have this community of women that can support me, and I can actually visualize a different life for myself. And so your Stay or Go was definitely a game changer. I went to a lawyer. I would have never done that. I had your workbook with me, and I had, you know, notes, and I just went in and I was prepared, and I felt so empowered, you know, and it just really empowered me to be able to go through the steps of the program and prepare myself. And I feel like when I do decide to go, I'm ready. I'm ready to go.
That's incredible. I cannot tell you how much I love what you're saying, because first of all, I didn't do anything. The program doesn't work unless the student shows up, right? So the fact that you followed through on all of these steps, you were courageous enough to put yourself first, you took notes, you were the ideal student, that's all credit to you. And that you were willing to do it is outstanding. And I love that you're not, I think a lot of women, and I've been very guilty of this too in the past, where I think we make these immediate choices in moments of pain or moments of trauma where we threaten to leave, you know, in order to scare them into getting sober. But what the women that really make it through leaving and come out healthier and happier and stronger are the ones that are doing exactly what you're doing, which is being methodical, being organized, being systematic, being practical, and also, like you mentioned, daring to dream about the possibilities, that life isn't over just because you leave. In fact, it's an opportunity for it to begin again in the most magical, wonderful way. So what are some of the things that you, if you were to leave, are looking forward to? Like, what are some of those dreams?
Well, I'm not working right now. I've worked part-time off and on through our marriage. I'd like to get a job because I think that would definitely be beneficial for me and get me around other people and other adults and just be able to have those relationships. I have 2 grandchildren right now. I'm looking forward to spending time with them. My younger son is moving out of state when he graduates college with his fiance. I dream of flying to their, home and spending some time with them and my future grandchildren with them and, just enjoying time with friends and traveling. I want to see the world. I want to be able to go out and see the world. And that was very much not a reality for me, especially if I stay and my husband continues to drink. I mean, he doesn't even want to go on vacations at all. So I have done some vacations just in the last few years by myself or myself and my son. And that was something I wouldn't have done years ago. So I know I can do these things on my own, and I'm okay with that. I don't mind being by myself. So I do have these dreams to just kind of move on and let the dysfunction behind, if that makes sense, to just kind of not have to worry about that on a daily basis anymore, because I can't remember in the last probably 20 plus years of not worrying about his drinking. I mean, it's always been there. It's always been like the third person in our relationship. And it's just always been there.
Yeah, that sounds, first of all, your plans sound very exciting. And I really want to park on what you said about being alone, because I think a lot of us are so scared. I know that, like, the fear of being alone was what kept me in my relationship for so long. How did you get to a point where you realized you were okay with being alone?
Well, I think as my kids grew up and I had to kind of let them fly and do their thing, that was a step. And then just in the last couple years, as I've been trying to heal from this alcoholism and codependency, I've kind of had to like force myself to be alone and kind of detach from my husband. Plus, with him drinking all the time, he's in the garage drinking hours and hours and hours on end. So it pretty much conditioned me to be alone. And I'm okay with it. And maybe part of it is the way I was raised. I fortunately have wonderful parents, grew up in a wonderful home, loving parents. We went to church every week. We had, just a wonderful life. I had wonderful grandparents, and, my life was pretty much idyllic growing up. So maybe that helps with being alone, that I'm okay with that. I don't mind being alone. It's not scary to me. I kind of look forward to it and just kind of doing my own thing.
I love that. I think you're right. I think you raised such a good point. We've been alone when you're married to somebody struggling with addiction. Even though you're in a partnership with them, you spend a significant amount of your time feeling alone. Even if they're sitting right next to you on a couch, you still somewhat feel alone. So it's really, I remember leaving the first time I was like literally alone in my house after I had left. He moved out. And I was for 10 years, so terrified of that moment, that actual moment where I would walk into the house and he wasn't there and I knew he wasn't coming there for that evening. And I remember when it literally happened, feeling elated that I didn't have to worry about the alcohol being around, or I didn't have to worry about, him being gone or when he was coming home. It was just like 1,000 pounds had lifted off of my shoulder, and I thought, what have I been so scared about? I feel less alone now being physically alone than I did being married to him.
Yeah, I think being lonely is worse than being alone. Lonely with someone is so much more hurtful than being alone, because you're just alone. You don't have anybody neglecting you or your feelings and all that. And you're just alone. It's okay.
That's right. That's absolutely right. That's a beautiful point. There's a difference between alone and lonely and rejected, being constantly rejected by someone choosing the substance abuse over you. And then the thing that runs in your mind is, why am I not good enough? Why don't they love me enough to get sober? Like, what am I doing wrong? Did you struggle with any of that self-talk, that negative self-talk, kind of blaming yourself for this not helping him get better?
I don't think I ever blamed myself through the process. I would just get really frustrated and angry with him because, of course, I came with all the answers. I would go to him and be like, well, if you only did X, Y, and Z, well, then everything would be fine. And the answers to this disease are so obvious to us, but to them, I think sometimes they're just like in this world where it's not really existing, the alcoholism or whatever addiction they have. It's like you try to reason with them, and it's like you're not reasoning with a rational human being at all. And it becomes so frustrating. But I don't think I ever beat myself up over it. I never blamed myself for it, which I think is kind of rare. But he didn't either. I don't think he's ever blamed me. Like, he's a very rational human being for the most part. He's never blamed me or emotionally abused me through this process, except for, like, on purpose, except for if he would drink too much and then, we would have things that would happen or whatever. But he never blamed me or, said anything mean to me through the process. He's always been very respectful, and he would get angry, but not directed at me. He would be angry at the world. So yeah, I think we've had it a lot different than maybe a lot of people because I haven't been abused, which in turn makes it that much harder for me to leave too. Because I feel so badly about the whole situation, and I feel like I'm abandoning him because he is so sick and he isn't mean to me. It's kind of tough, and I think maybe that's why I've stayed so long. That's why we've been married so long and I haven't left.
Right, because you were feeling like, because you said earlier, you weren't in an abusive relationship, although I will say neglect can sometimes be considered abuse, depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
So, but I think what you're saying is it wasn't like an outright hostile, name calling, swearing, very dramatic relationship. It was more calm. And how was he as a dad? How did the drinking affect the children?
When the kids were younger, and when my older son was still at home, he's in his early 30s now. So he's been out of the house for 7 years, if not a little bit longer. Back then, we hid it from the kids. They didn't know. When I finally, just a couple of years ago, told my older son, he had an inkling because he's older now and they have seen things more recently. Like if we'd have a cookout, he'd be kind of out of it and they'd be like, oh my gosh, he's smashed or whatever. But my younger son had no clue. Absolutely no clue when I told him. He said, well, I thought, cause he's on anti-anxiety pills. So he thought maybe his anti-anxiety pills made him sluggish and kind of, slow and stuff. He thought that's what that was because my husband always drinks in the garage and never brings it in the house. It was kind of, my kids have really not been affected greatly that I know of right now. They have not been affected because they never saw arguments. They never saw, their dad really drunk, as they were growing up. It was a very, very, very slow progression of his disease. Very slow. And it looked very different through the years. Like he would binge drink when we were in our 20s. And that was kind of acceptable, because that's what kids do in their 20s, And then, in our 30s, it was more him going out after work and I'd be home with the kids. He'd come home late. And I would avoid any kind of confrontation about those situations in front of the kids. So it always happened behind closed doors and they didn't know. So our kids really have not been affected as far as I know, but I have a completely open dialogue with them now. And I have told them, some of the things that have gone on through the years. And now they see it. They really see it, especially my younger son, because he's still living at home and he sees his dad now and how bad it is, with him drinking all day in the garage and coming in and falling asleep on the sofa or going up to bed right away at 5 o'clock at night. He sees it now, but as he was growing up, he didn't at all.
I love that you said you have a really open communication with your children. I think that is not only helpful for you, but incredibly important for kids. I really do think there's so many benefits to sharing the struggles and not, taking unnecessary responsibility or feeling ashamed of what your family struggles with because it's so common in every family, and equipping your kids with the tools necessary to handle their love of their parent, but also probably the feelings that come up when they discover that there's this issue.
Right. Yeah. My mother-in-law has a problem with alcoholism, and she had been sober for over 20 years as my younger son was growing up. They never talk about the alcoholism. Their family, my husband's family, they brushed it under the rug. You know, she quit drinking and nothing ever was talked about, and then she slowly started to ramp up again. And one of the turning points was about a year and a half ago during COVID. She had fallen because she was drinking. And my husband and I had to go over, and we called an ambulance, and she had to go to the hospital, and they released her in the middle of the night to come back home. And it was just a very traumatic situation, plus a huge trigger for my husband, because his family is his trigger, you know. And when that happened, you know, my younger son was like, well, what's going on? And, you know, why did she fall? And I took that opportunity to just sit down with him and tell him about his family history of alcoholism, because he had just turned 21 too. And I had asked my husband numerous times to talk to him about this addiction that runs so rampant in their family. And my older son is to another man, and I don't think there's addiction on that side of his, you know, family, and it doesn't run in my family. So I wasn't as concerned with him, but, you know, obviously I had talked to him too about it. But my younger son, I'm like, okay, here's the deal. First of all, none of this is your fault. None of this is your responsibility. But here's the reality of our family. And I told him about his grandmother, and I told him about his dad. And it was very hard because he had no idea. No idea. And I told him about, you know, the fact that he could possibly have this, you know, addiction. I don't see any signs of it. He's 22, and I really don't see any signs of it. But I told him that it could come up anytime during his life, and he needs to be careful, and he needs to understand what addiction is and be aware of that. And, you know, it was tough, but the kids needed to know. And I'm glad that I told them, and I'm glad we had this open dialogue. And I did say, we aren't going to brush this under the rug. We aren't. Your dad may, your grandmother may, but we aren't. We're going to face this head on. We're going to keep open dialogue, and we're going to keep talking about this, because it is not going to be that dirty little secret that we all just kind of ignore and let this cycle continue. I am determined to make sure that it stops here with my family. I'm not going to let it go any further.
That is incredible. Yay. Yeah, I wish I could give you a big high five and a big hug. I mean, oh my gosh. There's nothing that gets me more excited than when I hear moms and dads talk to their kids about addiction, because you're right. It's the way we break the cycle. It's the way we change this disease from an epidemic to a minor problem, is through communicating and forgetting and, you know, giving less power about the shame of it all, and empowering your kids, which is what you did, which is so brave of you. It is so brave of you, because I bet that must have been very scary. I mean, but the words you used and how intentional you were and how powerful you were sound incredible. I know a lot of people are probably writing down what you said. So thank you for sharing that. Are your kids okay with this? Is this, how did your sons respond?
My oldest is like very protective of me and very worried about me. And, you know, I kind of, every time I see him, he asks me how we're doing, and he's just very protective. But he's okay. And I think every time we get on the subject, I try to reinforce the fact that I'm working on me and I'm taking care of me, and you don't need to worry about me, you know, because I think they're both feeling that way. Like, well, how's she going to be? You know, what's going to happen to her? And I tell them exactly what I'm doing, and that I am taking all the steps that I need to do, you know, to make sure that I'm okay no matter what the outcome is. But they're okay. I think as long as we're talking about it and we're not ignoring it, and we talk about our feelings, that's just the most important thing. And, you know, I don't want to go through life anymore, you know, just on autopilot, because I think I did that for such a long time. I was just trying to pick up pieces constantly. I feel like I was just like treading water, or trying to pick up pieces and hiding. And I don't want to do that anymore. I want to face reality and what my life looks like. It's not what I envisioned. Definitely not. I thought I was going to grow old with this man and we were going to have this just wonderful life of, you know, doing whatever we want, you know, the things that we've worked so hard for, you know, and it's just not going to happen. And that's the hardest part, is just facing the fact that that's not my reality. It's not my reality anymore.
And you sound like you feel comfortable with that. Like, there's not judgment wrapped up in that this is your reality right now. But is that fair to say, that you feel at peace with that this is your reality?
Yeah, it took me a long time to get there, and I think the more work I did, my faith helps me through a lot of this, my faith in God, because I've always been a Christian, and I've always believed that God has a plan for me. And I used to believe through this that God is going to use him and I to help other people through this struggle. And all of my thoughts on that and you know, hopes were including him. Now I've kind of stepped back and thought, you know, God is leading me. He's put all of these things in my path and kind of leading me off on my own to do the work on my own, instead of constantly working and trying to get my husband to come along on this journey. I think God is just kind of separating me from that, and I'm going to do these things on my own as opposed to with him. That's where I feel I'm at right now. I think, you know, God is just lining things up for me. And instead of praying for God to heal him and make everything the way I think it's supposed to be, I just pray for God's will to be done. And whatever that is, I'm going to go along with that. And when you resolve to that fact, it's just I feel so much lighter, and I feel like I don't have to control things anymore. I just kind of give it to God and just be like, okay, I'm going to do what you want me to do. And he's just leading me constantly to new things that, you know, I'm doing things on my own, and I'm okay with that.
we have some women in our community who are Christians too, and I often hear them talk about the idea that their church would frown upon the idea of divorce if they ever left. They feel like they would lose their community. They feel that they would be judged, particularly if there was not any infidelity involved or any physical abuse. What do you say to that? How do you did you feel that way? Was that a part of the reason for staying? How have you, I love what you're saying, that you're feeling like God is leading you in a different direction. I think that's so healthy. Did you ever feel that, one of the reasons why you stayed a little bit longer was because of your faith, or no? Was that not practice?
Absolutely, I did. I stayed because I took my vows seriously. I love this man with all my heart. Yeah, my parents are still together. His parents are still together. I come from, a family of very long marriages, not a lot of divorces. My thoughts on marriage were through sickness and in health. That was a big thing. And when people describe alcoholism or addiction as a sickness, I had a very hard time resolving that, well, then I need to stay because he's sick. But then he also has a choice whether he stays sick or not. And that was something my therapist helped me with. And she said, God loves you as an individual just as much as he loves your husband. And your husband has abandoned you a long time ago in your marriage. He has an idol that he looks at and loves more than you, or at least it's more important than you and your marriage. And he's abandoned you in this marriage. And that kind of left me look at it differently. And I think God loves me that much that if I'm not happy in this marriage, and I've tried everything to try to help him, I really feel like I'm okay to leave. And God has really put things in my path to reinforce that. Your program, my therapist, Al-Anon, all these things have reinforced the fact that if I do decide to leave eventually, that I feel like God is okay with that. I really do, because my husband has a choice whether he gets better or not. And if he chooses not to do the work and not to do the things he needs to do, then he's abandoning me and our marriage.
I love that. I think that's very powerful. I think a lot of women probably needed to hear that. So I am very, very grateful. Is there anything that you want to address that I have not asked about before we wrap up?
I don't think so.
We covered a lot.
Yeah.
You have been so honest, and that's the only thing that I ask. There's no right or wrong answers during these interviews. It's just the truth. That's all we want. And you have delivered over and over again. I am incredibly grateful, and you've given me a lot of encouragement today. So thank you for your bravery, and thank you for volunteering to share your story. I know it's going to help a lot of people, and thank you for being honest.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad to share my story, and I really do want to help other women that are going through this.
Well, I think you were successful at that today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This podcast is created for your support, encouragement, and entertainment with my personal thoughts and beliefs. We are bonded together by the fact that we love someone suffering from addiction. This is not intended as a substitute for therapy or advice from a professional.